Hello, Culture Matters podcast. Boy, am I excited to introduce you to our guest today. Before I do that, here's a quote just for this episode. Where love rules, there is no will to power. And where power predominates, there love is lacking. The one is the shadow of the other. Carl Jung, our guest today. I'm very excited to introduce Dr. Supatra Tovar, who started as a fitness expert who's still one, became a nutritionist, an expert in that, has a double master's in nutrition and clinical psychology, and right now is deprogramming diet culture with a 7-step program we're going to talk about. 170,756,000 seconds to become a doctor. I was watching Commandments, that was interesting, to become a doctor, and so much exciting things. Thanks for coming on the show and putting in all that hard work, and now giving our audience wisdom around all of these big important topics. So I hope I did you justice. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you so much. You forgot psychologist, but
clinical psychologist, fitness expert, nutritionist, like, dang.
There we go.
So I have a question around the holistic view of psychology, self-performance. Why looking at the whole part as opposed to one component at a time? What would be your insights for our audience around that viewpoint?
Well, in the past, it was looked at, separate things, your physical health and your mental health. In fact, when I interviewed for my psychology program, the person interviewing me asked why I was switching directions away from dietetics. And I was shocked because for me, it's always been integrated. And I told her, I no, there's no veering away from anything. I'm incorporating everything because, millions of, well, maybe not millions, but thousands of studies are showing that nutrition plays a vital role in our mental health. What we eat, what we consume, how we consume it, when we consume it. But in addition to that, how often are we sleeping? How many hours? What time of day are we waking up? When are we going to bed? How much blue light are we consuming, during the day with our devices? And how much exercise we are getting, all play vital roles in mental health. And you can look at it as vice versa. What we think, how we are feeling, how those feelings are translating into our behaviors are directly affecting our physical health. So they work in tandem, in conjunction with each other. And if we don't address all of these areas equally, I believe we're missing aspects of improving health, whether it's mental or physical or both.
We have a lot of executives, entrepreneurs that listen to the Culture Matters podcast, right? Generally about business, culture, and just, of course, culture as a whole. Mm-hmm. What are some of the misnomers that you see around professionals, right, when it comes to sleep, when it comes to eating, and how that affects their goal setting, their performance? I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Well, I think in like the corporate or the executive world, it's really about production and how much effort is going into that production. I think there's some, movement towards working smarter, not harder. But for the most part, we live in a like kind of a toxic productivity lifestyle. And in that, you'll see, people consuming multiple cups of coffee just to try to make it through their day. You'll see them, forego sleep. You'll see them, staying up all hours of the night, working on their computers, working on emails, and their health suffers. So when their health suffers, you have to, equate that to their productivity suffering. So I actually work with a lot of people who are, in the higher corporate levels and really high stress jobs. And I help them find, a really healthy work-life balance, which includes, creating some boundaries around what you are willing to do, how many hours you're willing to put in, are you going to be answering emails after 8 p.m.? Are you going to be doing that on the weekends? What is your exercise routine? And I think for people who are, super busy like that, it's about creating small and achievable behaviors that help them achieve their health goals without necessarily compromising their work goals, but allowing them, the breadth and the ability to take care of themselves mentally and physically.
When did you start your practice?
I started in, oh gosh, 2020. Yes,
Wow,
2020.
congratulations.
Thank you. It was like in the middle of the pandemic. It was a crazy time. And, strangely enough, it was probably one of the more opportune times to start a practice because we had a huge uptick in people seeking out mental health
Really?
treatment. It was such an incredibly stressful time, when, even the word unprecedented got used like, 20 million times too many. It was just, people did not know how to handle the isolation. Kids especially did not know how to handle, going into online school and having to try to focus there, while at home and everything's crazy. So it was really advantageous in a sense for me because, and for everybody. I even started a Facebook group called Therapist Client Referrals because I was getting so many
Wow.
referral requests that I couldn't handle them all, and I know everyone else was. So I created this group where we could just trade back. I've got a client who's looking for this and this and this, and you
Ah.
put it out there in the world, and then people were able to get that. Now that we have like almost 7,000 members in this group.
Do you find that people look at diet and their fitness without realizing or being aware of that they have their psychology, their lived experience has a relationship with
Oh yeah.
those? Yeah, so if you can unpack some of your thoughts on that.
I mean, this is like pretty much one of my main areas of focus is how diet culture actually influences our lives. Diet culture is essentially just this kind of set of beliefs of the kind of ideal human body, while also at the same time rejecting anything else that's not found within that ideal and people's pursuit of that. So when we talk about diet, most people are thinking about dieting. Most people are thinking about how they have to, exercise excessively like celebrities do. They have to, get the latest weight loss medication. They have to, follow the top fitness trainers who train the celebrities and do 6 hours of exercise a day. So there's like, a whole, your podcast is about culture. We live in this, I think, toxic culture that is constantly making us feel like we are less than and selling us things to try to fix ourselves. So what I do is I try to deprogram people out of that. I actually, kind of created my method in working with clients who are coming to me for disordered eating or eating disorders, um, or just wanting to improve their health. I created a system that not only dispels the notion that dieting is actually effective for you, because it's not. It's actually one of the greatest contributors to weight gain. Dispel those notions, but also go into the psychology of why we think this way and how we can start to learn how to, listen more to ourselves, what our intuition and our bodies are telling us, rather than what the latest fitness or nutrition, guru is trying to tell you. So what I do with people is I take them through a process where, it starts with deprogramming. It's, examining diet culture and, learning how to reject it in the most positive and healthy way. And then I help people learn to cue into themselves by relearning their hunger and fullness cues. Because when you do this, your hunger and fullness hormones actually become in sync when they may have been out of sync when you were dieting. And that actually helps you lose weight by just tuning into those hunger and fullness cues. Then I work on what's going on in the mind. Where did we get these ideas? Where did we learn these things? What kind of attachments do we have to our caregivers? What did we learn along the way that was actually negative and not helpful to us? And we learn how to shape and those thoughts into more healthy, positive thoughts. including thoughts about food. And then we work on behavioral change, which, in my opinion, the most effective behavioral change starts with tiny, small, itty bitty behaviors that you can start to incorporate into your life. And the combination of all of that, I have seen everyone who's come into my doors, either recover from eating disorders or completely change their relationship to themselves and their food and achieve their, optimum health.
What relationship does one's anxieties have as it relates to the hunger, full hunger physiology?
Well, oftentimes anxiety will, promote. So if you look at it in terms of like cognitive behavioral therapy, which is developed by Aaron T. back in the, I believe, 60s, he examined the relationship between what you're thinking and how that translates into what you're feeling and how that translates into what you're doing. So if you're anxious, oftentimes, your thoughts are whatever the anxious thought is, am I going to get fired today? Will my boyfriend break up with me? Whatever the anxious thought is leads you to, obviously, anxiety, possible feelings of panic, just wanting to, your heart's racing, just wanting to find some kind of relief. And in that comes the behavior. And so most often what I'm seeing with people is they learn to cope with anxiety in their childhood by food. A lot of, mommies will give their kids like cupcakes and things are like, really comforting foods, warm stews and breads and things like that, which will make them feel like they're safe. And so a lot of times that's where, kind of disordered eating behavior comes into play. If you have excessive amounts of anxiety, you don't know how to deal with that, you will resort to the old, whatever made me feel safe before. So what I do is I help people understand that it's not necessarily the food that they're wanting, it's the safety that they're wanting. And the safety comes from changing the thought. If the thought is, I'm so worried my boyfriend's going to break up with me, but you have no evidence for that thought. Your boyfriend's loving, he's a wonderful person, he treats you kindly, all of that. Then the thought should be, I have a loving boyfriend. And when you think that, you feel safe and you tend not to go and seek comfort, maybe from your boyfriend, which is great, but not necessarily from food.
Do you believe there's a connection between the awareness and you as that anchor, that one could catch themselves
Yes.
in this behavior that could be happening below their awareness?
Oh, absolutely. Another aspect of my treatment is really teaching mindfulness. And I mean, that's among one of my core values. My others too are empathy and compassion. But I feel like if we all can learn mindfulness, which when you look at the kind of, accepted definition of it, mindfulness is an open-hearted, non-judgmental awareness of the present moment. Meaning, we are looking at the present moment without any kind of lens that clouds or shades, whatever we're looking at and informs a judgment, right? We're just observing, non-judgmentally in the moment. And if you look at most people, they're either really worried about the future, really regretful or contemplative about the past, or both. And they're very rarely in the present moment. So along with being in the present moment, when you're mindful, that means you're self-aware. You are, in a sense, observing yourself, but this is in a non-judgmental way. So when you can do that, you can think, oh, this is the moment. Oh my gosh, this is the thought. The old thought that I've had forever. I'm going to get fired. I'm going to get fired tomorrow is an old thought. So I'm aware of that thought right now, and I know that that thought's not true. And so I'm going to practice my new thought. And what I love to give people are mantras. They're not just affirmations. It's not something you just stick on a wall. or you read once a day. I like people to practice them because mantras are a form of meditation. And it's designed to put you in a calm, relaxed state. So say, the thought is the world is unsafe. You can change that thought to I am safe right now, or I am safe now, or just simply I am safe. So if you put that into a mantra, I am safe, I am safe, I am safe, I am safe. You do that just for 2 minutes. What you're doing when you're kind of breathing, you're practicing this in the moment, is you're actually activating your parasympathetic nervous system, which calms you down and relaxes you. But also, you're simultaneously practicing this new thought over and over again so you can recondition your mind into one of a feeling of safety as opposed to a constant feeling of being unsafe.
How would you suggest someone explore the validity of the impulse? For example, people are fired. People are being about to be broken up with. So I'm curious from there, what could be what are some ways to explore that?
Certainly. Well, certainly if, there's been tons of layoffs in your work, or your boyfriend is, showing obvious signs of either hiding something or lying to you or deceiving you, or is, in any way abusive. We look at the situation objectively. Is this really true? Is this really happening? Have you spoken to your boyfriend?
Oh,
Are you really looking at your company, and what's your performance in your company like? What are your chances that you will, be fired? If we look at this, really objectively, then we can figure out, what is the truth? Because that's what we're trying to come
but
to.
it's hard to be objective. I'm smashing cupcakes in my mouth. It's almost in a
Yes.
sense that if
Yeah.
one could be, I don't know, help me out here, but by dismantling that cycle of food as, let's say, the dependency, one can open up a space to start thinking and evaluating reality.
Yes.
I'm just
Yes.
trying to, you know what I'm saying? Because if
And
my coping mechanism is the cupcake, well, then I may be a self-fulfilling prophecy when it's not true, as well as B, not exploring objectivity, because I'm not facing the conflict, because now I'm dependent upon the coping mechanism. I'm curious.
Exactly.
What do you think? Or I'm trying to grasp the methodology here.
Well, I help people take that moment before they're going to go to their coping mechanism to truly check in with themselves. I provide them, worksheets, things like that, where they can start to, I don't advise anybody to really track food like calories and things like that. I think that's like super toxic. But in the beginning of treatment, I have them, fill out these worksheets where every time they're going to go, first they get to know if they're hungry or they're full. They need to really retune into those physical cues of hunger and fullness. So I practice that with them. But then we go on to discerning between hunger and fullness and mindless or, emotional eating.
Huh.
And so what they have to do, and the worksheets are really helpful, is that it makes you pause. Before you're going to eat, you're going to pause. You're going to ask yourself, like, oh, what time is it? How am I feeling? Which is huge. What am I eating? How hungry was I before I was eating? What am I eating? What's the percentage of the meal I ate? How full do I feel afterwards? And what am I feeling afterwards? What environment am I eating in? Is it in front of are we doom scrolling? Terrible time to eat, by the way. Don't eat and doom scroll. Don't ever. What's going on, so that, eventually what I can take them to is mindful eating, which is, if you look at mindfulness, it's open-hearted awareness of the present moment. But mindful eating is open-hearted awareness of the present moment with food. So we're looking at food differently. The other aspect that we see with diet culture is a vilification of food, which I highly, disagree with. In my view, there is no food that is bad or good. We just have food. And when we are looking at food non-judgmentally, we can decondition some of the, old diet culture conditioning, such as carbs are bad, sugar is going to make me fat, all of these thoughts about food, and get people to just tune into their food and how it makes the body feel. What they'll discover is when they really tune in, if they eat 5 cupcakes in a row, they're going to feel physically terrible, emotionally terrible too. But when you really tune in and say you have something that is in the kind of Mediterranean diet realm, something that we know is extremely healthy for the body, they tune into their body and they're like, whoa, I actually feel good. I'm actually, emotionally happier. My body is like, woo, woo, I have tons of energy. I could go all day. I can last a long time if I have a lot of fiber. That's the kind of thing that we have, been kind of suppressing in diet culture, is truly listening to ourselves. So, my philosophy is by the time somebody is, done in treatment with me, they are their own best expert. They don't listen to anyone else but themselves, not even me.
Do you think that our relationship with food reflects the culture?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, where do you even begin?
Yeah,
Like,
trying to.
you look at any diet right now, or you look at any advice you get from a doctor, God bless them, but they get like 25 hours of nutrition education. They're really not the people to be talking about diet, but they'll tell you, oh, your BMI, which is an outmoded form of assessing somebody's health, which I think needs to go away. Your BMI is over 30. And so what you need to do is you need to cut all carbs, go on a keto diet, and, exercise like crazy. All of that comes from diet culture. All of that has proven to be incorrect, which is why you see doctors now saying, oh, look at Ozempic and Wegovy. You see, diet and exercise doesn't work. So we have to take this medication, which is false. We don't. There's plenty of people in the world. There's plenty of cultures who have had, extensive, long lives in, especially in the blue zones, who would never even think about injecting themselves, who don't need to do that, who don't cut carbs, who don't like completely abstain from all alcohol. You see a lot of these, Mediterranean countries enjoying wine, but you see their life is completely different. And they are a model of how we can achieve our best health, live the longest without actually ever dieting. You look at Sicily, I think is one of the blue zones, and they eat bread and pasta every single day. But the difference is they're eating with others. They're eating mindfully. They're not doing it in front of the TV. They're not eating in their car. They're not eating crazy portions, and they're walking like crazy and dancing and celebrating with people and being social.
You think there's a connection with maybe subconscious portion control and doing it with others? The reason I ask is because if I'm having a conversation with someone, I can't talk and stuff my face.
Exactly. And that tends to make you eat slower. What we tend to do, especially in Western countries, is we will eat really fast. We'll eat in front of the TV. We won't take time to chew. We are not having conversations. And all of that, if we were to, slow down, eat with others, or eat mindfully when we're alone without distraction, it takes 20 minutes for the brain to register the presence of food in the stomach. So the slower you go, the more you realize it's not really about portion control. I don't like that term so much because it's very diety, but it's about listening to your body and deciding, oh, this is the moment. Oh, I'm feeling this food. I don't really feel hungry anymore, but I'm feeling really good. I'm feeling satiated, but not over full. this is the time to stop. You look at Okinawa, that's another blue zone. They have a saying called Hari Hachi Bu, which means 80% full. And they will monitor themselves. When the moment they feel 80% full, they stop eating. And you look at them and they have some of the highest percentage of centenarians in the world.
What does the blue zone mean?
So blue zones, I forget the name of the researcher, but they've studied these different areas. They call them blue zones. I can't remember off the top of my head exactly why. But there's, I think, 5 or 6 blue zones in the world. And it's where they have the highest proportions of centenarians. Loma Linda is one with the Adventists in California, here where I live. And so they have done extensive studies on these blue zones and determined, I think a lot of factors that are, cross-cultural between these areas that are predictors of longevity or living a long life. And so one of them, of course, is food. Most of these societies put plants first. Actually, I think all of these societies put plants first. Some even put plants only, like the Adventists, I think, tend to steer away from any kind of animal protein. So it's plants first. It's about how they are eating, how much they're eating, with who. And oftentimes it's in social circles. It's slower. It's more, mindful. They don't tend to have a lot of processed or highly processed foods. They tend to eat more, natural foods from their gardens. And they also exercise, but not in the same way that we do out here. They're not like, out there doing CrossFit or anything like that. They're gardening. They're getting up, they're squatting, up and squatting, up and squatting all day. They're walking in their communities. They're doing social dancing together, especially. And then it's also their mindset. What is their mindset on life and living? Where do they place their priorities? And often it's on, their community and their engagement. And so you see, when you have all of those factors together, you have all the ingredients that you need to live a long life naturally without any kind of medication. You see, it's changing a little bit now in Okinawa because there's a lot more Western influence. But forever, they had no incidences of ovarian and kidney cancer at all. Women didn't experience menopause. They just, their periods just stopped, but they didn't experience the same, crazy symptoms that most women in Western countries experience. And so there's a lot we can learn from them. And they are doing it naturally, and that's what I love.
Between 2020 and now, what's been the psyche shift, if any at all? I'm curious. We're kind of back to normal, air quotes. I'm curious. Your clients, they're working at different companies, different types of industries. Has there been a shift in the atmosphere, or is it generally the same since, because you started in the pandemic? I'm curious.
Well, certainly, if you're looking just at diet culture alone, when the pandemic hit, we actually, were in a period that was very good in terms of the way that we viewed our bodies. And you saw the fat positive movement, body positive movement. You saw HAES, which is health at every size movement, where people were starting to expand their, view of what is healthy, the rejection of BMI as the, only metric of metabolic health. But then once we opened back up, we really, when people started to get back out into society, that's when I think we took a turn for the worse. This is when we saw, rapid slim down. I think it started to become most apparent with, like, when Kim Kardashian I think she took Ozempic and lost a ton of weight to fit in that Marilyn Monroe dress. That was a pivotal turn to where we went back to a very toxic view of, emaciated or extremely thin as the ideal. And we've been fighting it ever since. And it's only gotten worse, in my opinion, with the proliferation of these weight loss medications. Now, for the use of them to treat and manage diabetes, I totally understand. I think it's important. So I'm not dissing them completely, and I would never, ever have a judgment on anyone who takes them ever, ever. But what we're seeing is a desperation among people who want to lose weight, that this is going to provide me the, magic pill. Because if you look at what it's been like for people who have any kind of excess weight, and I mean any kind of excess weight, if they're not like from size 0 to 4 as a woman, and they're anything more than that, they can be the subject of judgment or ridicule or, comments. And so it is very stigmatizing for people, and they feel tremendous amounts of vilification and shame. And to live in a society like that is exceptionally difficult. So I don't judge anybody who's taking these medications to lose weight in order to fit in, but you can see that this culture is very damaging to people's mental health and physical health.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting because I don't know if entrepreneurs would work without guilt and shame.
Mm-hmm.
I guess maybe the silver lining is, when you brought up the doctor, the 25 hours, my view, and I like your feedback on this, if I'm missing the mark on it, medicine is inherently reactive. If I'm sick, I'm going to go to an institution that's going to, their version of proactivity would be to react to my illness.
Right.
Whereas suppose when I'm listening to you, I'm thinking exercise, nutrition, and of course, one's psychology. That's about the individual, whereas medicine is about the institution. So their version of proactive is to my reaction as an individual. So is part of like what's happening in the world is there's, I guess, the silver lining. The more we know and the more people like yourself are out there that can support us as individuals, to be proactive in our lives. I'm just, trying to be Switzerland at the same time, right? Because interacting with entrepreneurs, I don't know how much one will work without some shame.
Well, of course. But you look at the medical industry, so closely tied with the pharmaceutical industry, and they profit off of people being sick or needing medication. What's interesting right now about the medication, the weight loss medication, is it's also, I don't want to forget that we have the food industry on top of that. The food industry has, of course, profited, as $1 trillion industry, has profited off of making foods highly palatable. So usually they're ultra processed. So if you look at the three of those, it's like the trifecta. Yeah. You are addicted to these very, toxic foods for our bodies. Therefore, you start to get sick, which makes the doctors money. So the food industry makes money, then the doctors make money, and then they're prescribing them medication. But right now, because of Ozempic and Wegovy and Zepbound and all of these medications, what's happening, which to me is like all of it's kind of a nightmare, is so many people are, they're appetite suppressing medications. So people are eating less. So the food industry is making less. Wow. People are losing weight, which is, for some people helpful. And so they're going, possibly going to the doctor less, although you look at the side effects of these medications and they're getting really scary. There's a lot more incidences of actual, what's called gastroparesis, which means your digestive system just stops. It becomes paralyzed and the food sits and rots in your stomach until you could perhaps die. Wow. So doctors might be doing okay money-wise because we're starting to see these side effects. And then you look at the pharmaceutical industry, and they are raking it in right now. So I look at all of these things and I'm like,
Yeah.
this is toxic. I want to do whatever is possible for me to go to the doctor as little as possible. As little as possible. I do not want to put medication into my body. And I certainly don't want to put toxic food in my body. If we were to do all of those things, we would essentially bankrupt these industries, which, I'm not saying I want to bankrupt medicine at all, but I think medicine needs to take a turn. I think it needs to be more about prevention. You start to see that. There's definitely like prevention measures out there, some of them effective and some of them not. Certainly, doctors, I think, are some of the biggest proliferators of weight stigmatization or weight shaming. The first thing that happens when you go into the doctors, they put you on a scale, and then they bring out their calculator, they calculate your BMI, and then they wag a finger at you and they make you feel awful. It's a horrible experience. And a lot of their public health campaigns have been about shaming people, which actually makes people gain more weight. They've done tons of study on that. If doctors were to talk to you more about, what are you doing right? What can you do more of in terms of that? How can I help and assist you in that way, rather than, pointing a finger at you and making you feel terrible? People would tend to go to them for prevention as well as, finding the cure for whatever disease they have.
That's an interesting thought, because not everyone is going to put their, and this is, a view I have. I don't think everyone's going to put their oomph into something that's going to be creating the next iPhone. So where are they going to put it? They may not put it anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
They may just consume themselves to oblivion. So ultimately, in that way, and not to say that the individual that created the iPhone didn't consume themselves into oblivion. So your argument is that, and I want to make sure I get this correctly, because these institutions like the doctors, they're not getting their education anytime soon. This is what myself and my group are providing.
Mm-hmm.
This education to the people that are willing to participate in us filling that.
Yeah. And wouldn't that be wonderful?
I want to ask about the group, the Facebook group. What inspired you to do the Facebook group where you're actually helping your competition? I think there's an interesting values conversation there, because it sounds like you're helping your competitors benefit their business when you're giving them referrals.
I firmly am, of the belief that we are actually never competing with each other, because we're completely unique individuals. And some people will resonate with me and some won't. They may resonate with a different therapist. When we look at, when therapists give referrals, most often it's if they are, it's not their wheelhouse. Like, if somebody were to come to me for, let's see, what's something I don't treat, like extreme OCD. Like, I've treated OCD before, but specializing in OCD, I don't do that, right? I want to get that person to a person who does that. That's most often, and you find that therapists are extremely helpful. They're in this profession because they want to help people, and so most often people will come to them, and if they can't help them, they're like, they're empathetic and they're compassionate, and they want to bridge them somewhere. I'm always like that. I mean, for me right now, my practice is like overfull. So, people who come to me, if I can't accommodate them, I'm going to definitely get them somewhere. I don't care how. And so this group that I created was, I think, so helpful, because there's a lot of therapist groups out there, but none of them focus solely on referrals. You have a lot of things you have to kind of wade through to get, to find referrals. This one only has referrals and job postings. Well, that's it. So if a practice is looking for an employee, and this is, across the country, even is now growing internationally, you can go onto this group and, scroll down and find what you're looking for. And I think it's like just a wonderful benefit for anybody who's trying to grow their practice or anyone who's trying to refer out.
What we have a lot of entrepreneurs that listen. What business advice do you have for those listening? You started 3 years ago and you're flush with opportunity. Many businesses don't make it 3 years, let alone be flush with
Yes.
opportunity. So what would be your advice to our?
Well, I can certainly attest to what it takes to build a practice. And I think from that, in the beginning, even before pandemic, I was doing my postdoctoral training in private practice. And so my whole focus during that time was, of course, to pass licensure exam, which was very important, both licensure exams, but also build my practice, because that was what I was going to launch into when I was licensed. And so I was very diligent. That's what I recommend to people, is if they have a goal, that they hone their diligence skills. That doesn't mean we're going toxic productivity. That doesn't mean that we're doing this 24 hours a day, but being very specific. For me, it was getting on other Facebook groups and trying to be the first person to respond to a referral request. So that meant having to check it regularly on a cycling basis. It meant networking, going and meeting other therapists who could get to know you personally. When you get to know therapists personally, you're more likely to refer to them. I really like this person. I know that you might not have sat in a room with them and gotten therapy from them, but you can get a good vibe from them and know what their practice is all about and know if it's successful, so that you can refer to them. So I became very active in local organizations, psychological organizations, and volunteered my time so I could get to know people. And that was super helpful as well. Getting to know doctors who will refer to you. I have a few doctors that I'm just kind of on their go-to list, and they'll just send people whenever they hear about them needing somebody. So it's really about kind of expanding yourself socially and also being extremely diligent in what you do. There may be times when you don't feel like doing things. Like for me, it's, sometimes it's doing social media stuff. It's like, but I'll do it because I know that it's, working to expand my reach, my message. It's working to, to help me meet other professionals. So it's about how are you allocating your time. And then most important too, is what is your work-life balance? If your work-life balance is all work, you're not going to be able to sustain yourself. You're not going to have longevity. Something will start to give. So how do you take care of yourself? I call my self-care militant self-care, because I do my therapy from here. This is actually my office. I do this. I haven't had an office since 2020. But to sit in a chair like this all day, they say sitting's like the new smoking. What can I do that offsets all of the sitting and all of the screen time? So I do 4 hours of self-care in the morning before I start a day, which means I, get up, I drink a lot of water, I exercise, I make a super duper yummy breakfast for myself, something hearty that I know is going to last me till whenever I have my break. I walk my dog. I then sit in a massage chair and get a little massage before I start, so that I am like ready to go. And when I'm sitting down in the chair, it is just you and me, and I am able to focus and concentrate. And I feel good and happy about myself. And I feel like I can be present. In between sessions, I'm also very diligent. I stretch, or I, sit on a little mini cycler and cycle my legs for a little bit so I can get the blood flowing. I do a kind of little cleansing ritual in between clients so that I don't carry what I heard before into the next thing. So it's all about how we take care of ourselves and how diligent we are, that I think. And on top of that, this is also very important, is having a very clear definition of your goal and keeping that in mind. I encourage people to make vision boards, to visualize what they are striving for on a regular basis, whether that's, through kind of a meditation every day or some visualization practice every day of what direction that they're heading in. Because once you do that, most often, this creates a really like hopeful, positive feeling in yourself, like invigorates you and motivates you. And that will lead to, the behaviors that are going to take you there.
The new book coming out in 24. What's it called? What's it about? Why should people read it?
It's called Deprogram Diet Culture. Rethink your relationship to food, heal your mind, and live a diet-free life. So essentially, it's what I have done in session with my clients, the work I do on myself even, encapsulated in a book. Right now, I have an online course of the same name, Deprogram Diet Culture, with, it's very like didactic, module-oriented online course that you can take if you go to anu-insight.com. And it's essentially all of the, same concepts from the course. And what I do is I include, very inspirational stories of my clients. All of their information, their confidentiality is, maintained by changing their information, but their stories help to illustrate each, point from each chapter of what I teach, which is, deprogramming your diet culture, helping people understand why diets don't work, helping people tune into their bodies, helping people change their thoughts, helping people learn mindful eating and lasting behavioral change so that they can go forth and achieve their optimal health, whatever it is that they want, whether they're interested in losing weight or they're just only focused on improving their health, or a combination of all of that or others, how they can achieve all of that naturally without looking into any kind of medication or any outside source other than learning how to tune in and listen to themselves.
People that want to hire or I guess apply to get in line or be referred out, what's the best way for them to contact you that are listening?
I have two websites. So one is drsupatratovar.com. It's dr and then my name all together.com, drsupatratovar.com. Or my other website is anu-insight.com. Either way, you can get a hold of me. You can go to Anu Insight and look at Deprogram Diet Culture, the course right now. You can, sign up for my newsletter so that you'll be informed when the book is going to be released. You can find all of my socials. I have two sets of socials, one on Dr. Supatra and one on Anu. You can follow those and look at that content. I also have a YouTube channel under Anu Insight. So all of that information can be found there. So hopefully that helps.
Last question. What are some books that have been instrumental in your growth, in your learnings to come to this point?
If I were to pick probably 3 sources of information that I think are integral, one would be, anything John Kabat-Zinn. He's, been kind of the pioneer. John Kabat-Zinn. He was, mindfulness and the concepts of mindfulness, of course, been around for centuries. This comes from Eastern Buddhist traditions. I actually hail from a Thai background, so I really resonate with these kind of Buddhist traditions. He was the one who popularized mindfulness in America today by using it to help treat anxiety. So he has a really, just seminal book called Wherever You Go, There You Are. And that teaches you how to practice mindfulness. I would say probably two of my most influential thought leaders in psychology have been Aaron T. Beck and John Bowlby. John Bowlby helped develop attachment theory, which I think is, just probably one of the most important things any psychologist can learn, because once you know how somebody grew up with their caregivers, it really can inform how they are today. And of course, back with CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, that's been very, very important with the addition of mindfulness in my practice. And I think when I was in my dietetics program, I read intuitive eating. Intuitive eating is essentially mindful eating. There's like very little difference. They, kind of add some concepts and stuff like that. But it was kind of groundbreaking for me because it wasn't about, hey, here you are and you have to count these calories. And if you have a, certain amount of calorie deficit, you're going to lose weight. There's all these very kind of rigid things that you learn as a dietitian. Important to know, nutritional science is important, but intuitive eating was kind of groundbreaking for me because I'm like, oh, it's really not necessarily about what you're counting and, looking at all your macros and making sure you're fitting into this box. It's about really personalizing your own pathway to healthy eating. And a part of the concept of that is gentle nutrition. How can you nourish yourself, but not necessarily restrict yourself from everything that's good in the world? How do you incorporate, a concept of all foods fitting? So that was pretty important to me as well.
What's one practical thing that the audience can leverage, like as soon as they stop listening to this conversation? We've given them so much depth, I think, that I should probably ask you that.
I think if, I were to say one thing that I would hope people start to do is to tune into themselves, to start to listen to, and you have to kind of make yourself still. And so meditation can really help with this. If you just sit still, you start to hear the voices that are, either yammering or they're very quiet and very loving and very, pro you. What I really recommend to people is to try to tune out the negative, wagging finger voice and listen to the loving voice that they have inside, because it's usually telling you what is the right thing to do. Say it's the bad boyfriend. It's probably telling you, this guy is not honoring you. He's not treating you with the respect that you deserve. Maybe it's time to be brave and break up. Or if he's awesome, look at how awesome he is. He's a wonderful person. You don't have to have these fears. I think if we were to really tune into our own voice, we'd be surprised at how wise and how amazing and how loving and good to us this voice is. So anyone can benefit from that, no matter what they're doing, no matter what they're trying to pursue. Listen to the inner voice and do what it's telling you. And it's most often the loving voice. I love the quote that you put up in the beginning too, because I am a big proponent of, and I tell all my clients, I'm kind of embarrassed, but I tell all my clients that they need to go watch Jim Carrey's commencement speech.
Oh, that's a great
You
one.
mentioned my commencement speech. He was a big inspiration for my commencement speech, which was, basically, if you like whittle it down, it's like we've gone through all of this so many hours, so many minutes, so many seconds of pain, because it's painful to get a doctorate. And why are we doing this? It's because we love. We love to help people. That is what drives me. Jim Carrey's commencement speech is amazing because he talks about basically that life comes down to a decision between love and fear. And if you choose love, you'll never, ever go wrong. It's so beautiful, this speech. And I just hope everybody can, watch it and take home the lesson that, if we really did try to put aside our fears and do what we love, focus on what we love, we can't go wrong.